group not generally considered to be a jazz group. What drew you towards jazz?
It was just coincidence, really, a sequence of events that led me towards CMP, a jazz label. I can remember as far back as the first solo album titles, people referring to me as a jazz bass player, which I didn't really understand why. So when I came into contact with the head of CMP Records, it was a very casual affair whereby I became friends with him, and he allowed me to use the studio when his jazz artists weren't using it. So the latest album was recorded over a very long period of time, but very short spurts. While I was there would be jazz musicians passing through just to say hello, and it seemed like a good idea to ask them to play, you know. And that's basically how it happened. It just fell into place.
How have the jazz traditionalists reacted to you and your music?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, it's been a strange marriage, shall we say. They kind of look at me, I guess, as a pop star, which again I think is totally wrong, but they basically can play anything you throw at them. So it was very interesting for me to be coming from an area, how shall I put it, where I'm considered a bit risque, I guess, in commercial terms, to suddenly be amongst people who thought of me as the most commercial thing they'd ever played music on, you know.
You've developed a very personal style of playing the bass. How did the sound actually evolve?
I had two bass guitars, very cheap bass guitars at that time, and I would rehearse with one of them with the band, the other one I would rehearse at home with, and I found that the sounds I wanted to create weren't really happening until I decided to take the frets off the bass. As time went by, things I was playing at home I couldn't recreate with the band, so it was a very slow process of switching to fretless. Plus I also had people in the press saying things like I must go to bed listening to Jaco Pastorius. So I was determined never to listen to Jaco Pastorius at that time, just so I wouldn't be influenced by him. It's only relatively recent that I've discovered that I've been missing, really.
Mick, you've worked as both a sideman and also a frontman. What's the fundamental difference for you?
Well, it's much easier being a sideman, but then again you can never play things totally the way you want to play them. It's very interesting being the front man at this stage in my career, where I'm actually organising a tour for this album. Everyone in the band are my friends, and suddenly they're asking me questions whether they can do this and do that, and it's very strange to suddenly be in that position with people that you consider your equals anyway. But I think I like it. I think I prefer it to being a sideman.
Talking about your writing, how much has writing on computer affected your music?
It's affected it a lot. One of the most important things for me in writing, I guess, is rhythm. I'd say this album is basically playing around with rhythms as far as I could take them. So most of my inspiration comes from the drum tracks. Using computer, I was able to arrange as much as and rearrange as much as I possibly wanted to. Also, with the addition of MIDI through the computer, I could substitute a lot of the rhythm tracks for actual keyboard sounds. So a lot of the album has been written in that way, where even the melodious aspects of the album have a certain rhythm to them. It's really opened up a lot of doors.
How do you tie the combination of computers, which tend to be, I guess, programmed, obviously, and then jazz improvisation? How do you marry the two?
It was a very difficult process, and a lot of the time it would be like taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, because there's a lot of time spent in the studios transferring what you've done on computer onto the real tape. And I found the more I used real musicians, the more I'd have to go back, take some of those things away and actually play them live. So I've come to the conclusion that using a computer is incredibly helpful when you're writing, but I think in future in the studio I'd much rather go for a live feeling between the musicians, which is what some people might say it's going backwards, very old-fashioned, but I think there's a lot to be said for the chemistry of the musicians being in the same room playing at the same time.
As well as being a musician, you're also known as being a sculptor. What ambitions drive you? What is it you really want to achieve with your career?
I think as far as sculpture goes, I don't really try and pursue sculpting as to the extent of music professionally. It's something I really do for myself, and if people want to see it and if they like to see it, I might have an exhibition, but it's not something I'm determined to do career-wise.
How would you say your ambitions have changed from when, I guess 15 years ago, you were looking ahead at your career, and now you've been more experienced? I guess you've aged, obviously. How have your ambitions changed?
That's very interesting. I guess they don't really change. I still feel as if I'm trying to prove the same things. I still feel as if I'm single-handedly, trying to prove to everyone that instrumental music is worthwhile and can be interesting and rewarding. It's just my outlook towards it that's changed. I was very aggressive with my approach a while back when I started, and determined to prove to everyone that I was a different kind of bass player. I wanted to be the best bass player in the world. Unfortunately, when people started to say that, it frightened me away, and I went completely the opposite direction. So now I'm quite happy to let people say what they want about my playing. I'm a lot more relaxed about my writing, and a lot more comfortable with it. I think in the beginning you always have this fear that you're going to run out of material, and you have to get everything down as quickly as you can. So that passes with time. You become much more kind of, well, there's going to be another one, and what's it going to be like? You can play around with it a lot more.